This is Ghost, and we're live on the air on our Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook channels. And we're here with Enoltra for the first time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really fun to have artists from around the world. And you're in Austria, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, that's what the amazing thing with technology today. I'm in New England, United States, talking to somebody in Austria, and that's really cool. Now, before we get into the full interview, and this is kind of like a behind music interview that we all ours we have on the program, we do have a sponsor. The sponsor is Newsly.me. They're an iOS app that actually hosts a podcast. So this podcast is actually on Newsly as an audio podcast. And what this app does is it translates video into audio. So if you use coupon code GHOST2021, you get 1 month free premium subscription, so you can stop scrolling and start listening. And that's Ghost 2021, you get 1 month free premium subscription. And we're on there. So after this podcast is over, if you want to hear the audio version, you can listen to it there. So I'm going to actually put up your Instagram. We always encourage everybody to check out the artists that we talk to. And we also have a video of a song that we can actually put up. And before we get into the interview, we usually like to have people listen to the artist that we're going to talk to so they get a kind of context of what we're talking about. So we've actually got the video for our nights. And if we're actually going to go into that, and then we'll talk to you on the back of it and go into the full interview. Is that cool?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so I'm put you on mute, and then we'll come back, and then we'll talk about how you got into music and what you're doing right now and all those things. So here we go. So that was an Ultra and Summer Nights, and we're back. And that's a really I love the song. I think I love the feel of it, and I
Thank
think
you.
it's a good introduction to your sound. Though I know it's one song probably doesn't represent everything that you sound like, but that is a more current music from you, right? Was
Mhm,
that
mhm.
more current songs? So I know we tried to get you on the podcast for a long time, and now we finally got you. So that's like, oh yeah, we finally have her on. So one of the things we always ask everybody that comes on at the beginning is like, when did you get into music, and like what age did you get interested in it?
So I kind of got pushed into music school when I was a kid, since I was 5 or 6. And then I ended up dropping it around 10 because as a kid, you still don't really know what you want to do. And my primary focus back then was just doing kid stuff, living a normal child life. And
Yeah.
but then I kind of randomly just picked up music production for the first time in my life when I was in second year of high school. And it was really bad, but it's a learning experience. Your first 50 songs are
First,
going to be really bad.
yeah.
And then I didn't start seriously taking music as something I want to actually do full time, or like commit myself more to, until I was in the end of my first year of bachelor's, which was, I think that's now 5 or 6 years ago. So maybe 6 years.
Hmm.
And for the first 2 years of that, obviously, I was really, really still not producing anything special. I was just learning, watching tutorials all the time, learning how to sound design. And then I think I really kind of started releasing maybe like less than 2 years ago. And
Hmm.
that's, yeah, 2 years ago.
Yeah,
And
I think that's
not
when I found.
often.
Yeah, I think that's when I found
Exactly.
you out there.
Yeah. I think right around my second release, probably, that you found me. And I haven't released much because I was still in the phase where I can make kind of good music, but it took a long time to get to that point. And nowadays, I finally feel like I'm pushing out more music, like seriously making more music and finishing more music faster. So,
Yeah, I think it's a process because I'm 54, right? And I'm a child of the 70s. And, I had garage bands for real, like in the garage
hmm
and in
hmm
the basement. And we were kind of channeling punk.
hmm
I was like, I'm a black kid, but like I like the Ramones, right? So
hmm
I like stuff at CBGB, like the Talking Heads and Blondie and the
hmm
Clash. So when I got together, we were kind of different because we were like a black suburban punk band, and people were like, "Well, that's different. That's not what we expect." And then I kind of got in a new wave because I saw Joy Division and I saw The Cure, and I'm like, because MTV came along, and I'm like,
yeah,
"Oh wow, I can get into keyboards." And that was like the electronic music back then is like new wave. Looking at Nick Rhodes and Duran Duran on a Jupiter 8, and they're like, "Wow, that's it." And so, yeah, I just got inspired by the people I saw, or what I heard on the radio, what I saw on MTV, and then I wanted to do it. And I said, "Well, I'm going to go do it." And I just, because I just decided like it was important to me, and I started to do it. And by the age 54 now, I'm doing way better than I did at 17.
obviously.
Yeah, you just because you stick with it or don't. So one of the things I always ask is like in terms of so you found out you had this talent, you wanted to go right into music production. Um, did you have like people that reference points, like your heroes or people that you listen to that kind of got you into the style of music you're into? Because we always like to ask people what who their influences are.
I mean, I do have a lot of influences, but I would say, the tipping point of me actually starting to take music seriously as something I love was actually Dead Mouse. And he released like a remix
Hmm.
competition in March, like 6 or 7 years ago. And when I saw that,
Yeah,
I said to myself, okay, I'm
that's
gonna
it.
start learning how to make music, you know,
Yeah,
like
because a
electronic
lot of
music. I
people
mean,
don't.
yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't realize, how involved music is. They get into
Mm,
like the fashion of it. They get into like the look of it when you're on stage, but they don't know like what's happening in the lab. Okay, what's happening like in your home studio. And when you're talking about sound design, I'm like, ooh, I love because I'm a synthesis, right? You see
mhm.
all my
Yeah.
modes and stuff behind me, and it's like that's where I start. Like I
Mhm,
always start at the waveform, doing my subtractive synthesis and building up pads and patches and whatever.
mhm.
And I've always been really kind of the mad scientist in the lab. Is like, ooh, I can this and take that. Was that something that appealed to you about electronic music? The fact that you could start from like scratch, or you could grab samples, or you can do whatever you want. But you did mention like sound design, so I'm kind of intrigued by that.
So, I mean, I definitely, the most fascinating thing to me, even to this day, is that you can, for example, just take one sound and make anything you want out of it. You can take micro sections from that sound and turn it into something completely different. So,
Yeah.
as an exercise a while ago, maybe like 4 years ago, while I was still practicing how to actually make music, I took a kick sample and I tried to make a whole song by micro sampling that kick, or
Oh, cool.
editing it, pitching it up, putting so many different effects until it sounded like something else, basically.
Yeah, it's
And
kind of
I
like
do love,
you love that.
Eurorack synthesizers as well, like just
Yeah,
patching
yeah.
things up. However, I don't have an opportunity that often to play with Eurorack, only
Mhm.
at like the
Studios.
educational institution where I went, studios, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, just the benefit of being 54 is over time I've taken my day job and bought all these like
Yeah.
toys. I got my Moogs, I got all my Euro racks and all that stuff. But it took me like 20 years to get them. But
Yeah.
so but the thing is like I really love the idea of electronic music, right? Like when like if you go back to the history of it, like in New York City when the first Moog showed up, and you had
Hmm.
these musicians that had these synthesizers that didn't have any keyboards. So it's kind of like at the beginning is where we are today again. Is people had these electronic synthesizers and there was no keyboard. They just had
Yeah.
CV and they were just using like LFOs and they were using random voltage and they were doing all this stuff to trigger beats, to trigger melodies. And then later they said, oh, let's put keyboards on them and try to control them musically. But there was actually a lot of people that rebelled against that. They said, this is a new type of music. We don't necessarily need the keyboard. And so people today even come at it that way. There you got, electronic musicians that will compose, by doing everything but using a keyboard, doing all kinds of techniques, granular synthesis, cutting and pasting, clipping, doing this, but not ever physically using a keyboard to drive it. Um, and it's just, it's actually not uncommon because actually that's how it started.
Hmm. Yeah.
But so with in your type of music that you do, this is always a hard question. What genre would you label your music in? Because a lot of people like don't want to get tied down to what genre they're in, but like what would you say is your genre?
Well, I would say the basis, like the in practice, like all most of my inspiration um lies, or the melodies themselves and the way I design sound lie in trance.
Trance.
However, of course, like I do make even, like techno, breakbeat, even ambiental, but somehow they always have a few signature sounds taken straight from trance, like the
Trance.
leads,
Hmm.
maybe even the bass line.
Yeah, because I think like I tried to get out of that game on the genre by saying expansive sound. So
Hmm.
and so what that did is like when people try to pin me down. So what does that mean? Well, it means that one day I could do progressive rock, next day I
Yeah.
could do glitch this, I could trance, I could trap, I could do anything because I'm
Hmm.
not going to put the label. I'm going to be expansive. So what does that mean? It means like everything.
Hmm.
so so then you don't get pinned down, and they try and they're like, well, what am I going to tell the club? It's like tell them it's expansive. But so I think one of the other things I like to ask is like your process. So you've talked about sound design. Are you primarily like a person that deals with like the DAW, does everything within a digital audio workstation, or do you like to go to the studio to finalize what you do, or is it a combination of whatever? Sir.
So definitely, I do everything from start to finish at home at my bedroom studio because that
Mhm.
is the situation I'm in right now. Except, a few times when I have access to a university studio. However, I still kind of like feel the most comfortable home. I might not have the best equipment or the most equipment, but I can literally, even if I just have the laptop, I can make something work, and that's the beauty of electronic music. That's why I like it so much, because you can just sit on a laptop even and just, or even like
Yeah.
an iPad, and just create and
Yeah.
edit patches and stuff. Like I do have like a few synths on my iPad, which is also fun and a great budget replacement for Eurorack.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's like I've always like Jack White kind of told people like I can use $100 plastic guitar,
Hmm.
right? It doesn't really matter. Like there's
No.
songs that have been written on Casios, right? There's songs
Hmm.
that are
Exactly.
using a like a drum on on a cardboard box. You know, 'cause
Yeah.
you can do like field recordings, put them into a sampler and come up with all this stuff, right? Like I don't want to use licensed beats, so I'm just going to go sample stuff and then grab
Yes.
things and
Yeah.
collide it. And you can do anything you want, and so you can, that's where it's kind of egalitarian because like you don't have to have like the best equipment to sound great because one thing I always liked in my music is the punk aesthetic. If you think
Hmm.
about like a band like the Ramones or a
Yeah.
band like the Husker Du or the Replacements, they lo-fi was the thing. It's like they weren't trying to sound perfect, and it was about like the attitude and the honesty of maybe allowing happy accidents to stay in the mix. Maybe
Hmm.
not caring that you don't have a $10,000 mic. You don't have a $5,000 mic. You're doing it because if you have a punk type of attitude, it doesn't matter if your mic's not that great. It's kind of like the heart of what you're doing, right? It doesn't. So you don't have to have the best plugins in the world. It's kind of like what you write is more important, like what you put together.
Exactly. Yeah. And
So
I'm a big proponent of that, of progress over perfectionism.
yeah, I always tell people like the happy accidents are what makes like a lot of classic music. Like if you
Yes.
listen to the songs you love from the 70s and the 60s and you really listen, you'll hear mistakes. You'll hear editing mistakes,
Hmm.
timing mistakes, key change mistakes, but those mistakes are actually part of the beauty of the song. It's kind of like I always look at it as like a sound painting. And I think electronic
Yeah.
musicians we understand it because we layer like a painter, right? So you're layering all these things on top of each other. And it's kind of like, sometimes there are things that are collisions. And maybe if you're trying to be perfect, you try to clean it all up. But I always tell people as a producer, it's like sometimes your second or third take is better than your 25th take
Yes.
because you are getting away from your original intention, you know,
Exactly.
and you got to be willing to live with it. Because sometimes the third take is so much better than the 25th, and even though you thought you got better, a lot of times if you're a singer, you actually start deviating and correcting
Yeah.
yourself and start saying, "Oh, I don't know if I really want to say that anymore," right? And so the original intent is actually more honest of what you really felt.
I
And the
completely
same thing
agree.
goes yeah, the same thing goes for if you're not a singer, but if you're, like, putting down tracks, like, the original idea was probably closer to what was in your head, and
Yeah. Always.
then it becomes something else, so it's like, to me, I'd rather go and write different songs and, like, put that down as a separate thing and then decide if I wanna work on it rather than keep on trying to overdo it. But, that's just a choice, but, so one of the other things is, like, are you actually performing now? Out in
I
the
do
world?
have some gigs here locally, and I did play a festival in Croatia recently.
Cool.
I'm not going to be playing again until the end of August because I'm going on a family visit
Mhm.
until the 25th. But I have some arrangements from the 25th, something that's kind of like more long term, not just like a single gig. So that's progress for me. And I'm trying to also expand into like another city here in Austria, as well as Berlin, because Berlin
Yeah,
is
Berlin's like
where all the techno music is, you know?
so more like electronic music. Because like I always
Hmm.
tell people, like if you think about the history, Kraftwerk and Brian Eno and
Yeah.
all the work that Bowie did with and it's just the idea. I've always wanted to play there as an electronic musician because I understand it. Like even if people understand Prince, Prince was influenced by Kraftwerk. A
Hmm.
lot of his sound
Yeah.
comes out of Kraftwerk. It's just he came at it from a funk direction, heard that progressive stuff, and he kind of put it into his sound. Um, and I think it's cool when you merge different cultures and different areas into one sound. And that's why I kind of loved about New Wave, because New Wave could have a world beat, you could have a reggae beat, you could have a rock beat. It wasn't like stuck in a lane. You could
Yeah.
start the song anywhere. You could have a fully synthesized song, or you could have a lot of guitar, and a little bit of synth. It had like a lot of choices. Do you find today that when people try to put you in the trance lane and put you in that they're trying to narrow your ability to kind of, well, maybe I want to make a hybrid, you know? Do you feel like or do you just go where you want to go and you don't say, well, I just want to stay in this lane?
Well, I haven't felt like anybody's been putting me in any specific boxes, except specifically sometimes when I'm playing, because the festival I played in Croatia, they put me on the trance stage,
Hmm.
before, because they've listened to my music and to my private
And
demos
that's
that
what,
I'm saving for labels, and they just put me on the trance stage basically. But most of the time, 99% of the time, nobody really says, "Oh, so you're a trance artist." They just say electronic artists, you
yeah,
know?
because it keeps you in a wider lane. Because like the only problem I have when like somebody puts me, like I'm not really EDM at all. I'm like
Yeah, yeah.
progressive rock. I mean, like Yes and
Mhm,
Genesis are more and Funkadelic are where I am. So if somebody puts
mhm,
me on an EDM stage, the audience is going to be like, "That's not
mhm.
EDM." So it's like, yeah. So it's kind of better if you're getting a wider palette, because then you have more room to move. Um, but yeah, I think that's the only thing today because you get like A&R people and marketing people, they want to pin you down, and then
They
there's
want a
all you
very specific sound,
yeah,
labels
yeah,
mostly. Like for shows and privately, people don't put me into
yeah,
boxes, but labels even rejected, like trance labels and progressive labels rejected my trance and progressive demos. They were like, "Oh yeah, this is not really our style." They're looking for exactly one type of cookie cutter sound, each label, their
yeah,
specific cookie cutter sound, and it's
I,
so impossible
yeah.
to get this specific, like I cannot I cannot force myself
Well,
inspiration
I think
comes as it
I
comes,
think
you know.
I think they're being a little narrow-minded because the whole thing about music, going even back to Hendrix, right? Hendrix didn't sound like anybody else, right? So when they got
Yeah.
him in the studio, they started telling him, "Oh, you got to tone that feedback down. Oh, you can't do these harmonics. You can't do this. You can't do that." And then he eventually end up having to get like engineers that let him go on the board and control it
Hmm.
because he was beyond where everybody was, right? And so everybody was trying to put him in a box and tone him down, and he refused to do it because I think when you know what you want as a musician, you have to kind of push for your sound because there's lots of people who try to make you clone other people.
Yeah, they're
And
trying to replicate marketing success from one singular artist in each label,
yeah,
that each label has as the most successful artist, and they are just looking for clones of that same artist because they think it's going to maximize their profit. But in the end, what they end up with is a crowd that obviously knows this is just a clone and feels it, and it doesn't feel personal anymore, and these artists get signed, but they never progress above the signing stage
yeah,
because they get stuck there
they're
by the,
stuck.
like they get put there by the label and they're stuck, you know.
Yeah, it's what happens. Well, if you think about like disco, disco got to a point where there was a formula, and then a lot of stuff started sounding the same, and then it got
Mhm.
burned out, right? And then
Yeah.
you get every time we get a genre, and then you go look at these people. Like I get songwriting pitches because I'm a registered songwriter, and then they
Mhm.
actually say mirror Drake, mirror this,
Mm.
and they'll tell me they want me to mirror something. I'm like, I don't like that. right? So I always go with the people that take what I want, what I'm doing, and throw it into an ad or throw it into a 30-second thing in a movie because it's me. It's my stuff. Like I just stick to my guns and I say I'm going to do it my way, and people will come to me, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the thing is that these guys don't understand that they can destroy a whole scene if
Yeah.
everything in the scene sounds the same because they take all the energy out of you. Like you said, like the kids are going to get like that's not cool. It's not fun anymore, because you do want to hear something different,
Yeah.
and they just
Me
are
too,
scared of the difference. And they're so scared of the difference. It's like, but that's the whole point.
Yeah.
but, but so it's cool. They see somebody in your point in your career that realizes that that's not the way to go because they might think it's the way to go, but you're on the right track, in my opinion. But
I mean,
so
I'm gonna try and go solo and like, I mean, independent. But
independent,
right
yeah,
now I'm just saving up money to be able to cover all the marketing, and
yeah, yeah,
that's why I haven't released anything. I do have a lot of demos in the back burner, but I'm either saving them for when I get accepted into a label or for when I have enough money to pay for monthly
independently.
marketing expenses.
Yeah, you have to. Well, a lot of people have decided though. You get big bands, I mean, different genres, but like a band like Pearl Jam went independent. A band
Hmm.
like Radiohead went independent. Bands like Wilco, they went independent. Why? They could have the machine, but they didn't like it because they
Yeah.
like to go wherever they want. Like a band like Radiohead, so experimental. And once in a
Yeah.
while, they'll have a song like Creep, but most of their stuff is not digestible by the market, right? They do what they want, and then
But they're
once in a
still
while, they get,
popular.
yeah, they're super popular, but they're not like at the top 10. They
It
can
doesn't have
get
to be.
yeah, yeah, you can get a crowd, you can be in the industry, you don't have to be in the top 20.
Yeah, you
You can
you really don't. You can
you
be a
can act
C-list DJ,
yeah,
and still do well, really well.
yeah, because 'cause you're just gonna get out there and get a following, and, like, to me, if you
Yeah.
get a live following, like what you're trying to build in cities,
Hmm.
that's the way people used to do, like, you think about the old scenes, like CBGBs
Yeah.
or the Whiskey A Go Go. There's certain scenes, like in America, that were iconic,
Yeah.
Haight-Ashbury scene, because all those bands went to that scene and they kinda built up a reputation, and then they were able to come out from there. Like the
Yeah.
Talking Heads were at CBGBs and then they blew up and they got worldwide, but they were in that scene, with Patti Smith and Blondie and all those guys, and they built this kind of new wave scene, and it was
Hmm.
very diverse. Like Patti Smith was a poet, and then
Yeah.
you had the Talking Heads is like very oddball, not what anybody else was doing, and so it seemed like it was more acceptable in those times allow something like a Talking Heads and a Blondie to be in the same place. And now
Hmm.
people want cookie cutter all the way, and that was very diverse. And that's
Yeah.
why I'm always kind of
Yeah.
pointing out to people like, you don't remember when you had like bands that were totally different in the same space. You can't remember that, But I digress. But so are you working on any collaborations with any other artists, or just totally focused on your own sound?
Right now I'm only working on my own stuff just because I haven't I've had actually proposals for collaborations, but I didn't have enough time to take on the
Hmm.
challenge. I do want to send some of my work in progress sounds like clips and stuff to certain artists and
Hmm.
ask them if they want to finish it or like collaborate by like I started and then you finish and then let's see what happens, but which would be really good for marketing as well.
Yeah, that is part
So
of.
I do want to do one collaboration with one particular artist if I can get to him.
Hmm.
But I started something with a similar sound to his. By well, it's not you know it if you really look closely and if you know him well, then you can kind
You
of
can feel
feel where I got the inspiration, but it's not super
it. Yeah.
direct. like only maybe in the percussions, like how detailed
Yeah,
the
it's like
percussions are,
influence. Like,
basically.
yeah, you can have like a sound that's like influenced by somebody, but it's not a clone. Like
Yeah.
I always point out, like, you can have an influenced sound that's not exactly that sound, but it can show you were inspired by it. Like I could get really into the Velvets, the Velvet Underground, and do a Lou
Hmm.
Reed kind of Velvet Underground and Nico era type of sound, but I'm not cloning it. I'm just inspired by that sound, so I'll do something like Waiting for the Man type of sound, but it's not exactly note for note what that is. It's in the vein. It's in the area. So I think that's part of being a musician is like we pull our influences. And I think it's like subconscious, or do you think it's direct? Like, do you just like something and then you subconsciously do it and then you listen to it? It's like, oh wow, I actually pulled something here because I like this, and it ends up showing up in your music, but it wasn't like a conscious decision. You kind of just fell into it, or do you think you directed it?
It's a mix of different situations. So sometimes it's like the last thing you mentioned, and for example, for the last work in progress that I started, it was kind of like I got inspired first. Like I heard a brand new release from an artist that I really like, and I was thinking, I wish I could create something like that. And then I
Hmm.
got kind of inspired, let's say, by a muse, when you have some
Yeah.
close friends or family or a partner that makes you like gives you a particularly positive day. Doesn't matter who it is, like I said, it can be anybody who is in your life.
Hmm.
That kind of inspired me as well. I just suddenly got the idea for the song, for the lyrics and for the melody, and then as I sat down, I was thinking, okay, you know what, I actually have an idea. I found that I created a sound in the pads that kind of pushed me or reminded me of the artist I was originally inspired by.
Hmm.
And then it kind of, you know, the ball got rolling from there. And yeah.
Well, I find it's like my influences kind of come from all over the place. I mean, I've had situations where it's kind of like, oh, I wrote the lyrics on a napkin, right?
Hmm.
That's kind of like a lot of songwriters. Like, oh, I wrote it on a napkin. I wrote it on a book, or lately people would say, oh, I'm on my phone and I put a voice memo down.
Yeah, yeah. I mostly make voice memos or notes.
Yeah, and then a lot of times with my stuff, because I've got these old analog synths,
Hmm.
what I've learned to do is instead of trying to tame them and force them to do something that I think I want to do. I like
Hmm.
turn them on and then I experiment. I kind of let them tell me something because I one thing I love about my analog synth is they kind of talk back to you
Yeah.
and they go in directions you didn't expect. And instead of trying to tame it, I actually okay, it's my Moog is telling me this today, and I'm actually gonna go with it and just go with the way it's going and actually write based on some random thing it's doing and like I'll just take it and run with it. And I find that that's kind of like a poet listening to the muse and out of the universe. My instruments kind of talk to me, and then I think, oh, I'm actually gonna listen to what it's saying, and then go with it. So I don't know if you ever feel like that, like when you're
Well,
working on something.
it's again, it's very mixed. Sometimes I just feel like I want to make anything, and then I open my software and scroll through the presets of some synth, or like just select random wave shapes, and then
Hmm.
suddenly I find that, like, I find through these, like, let's say, research methods or exploration methods, I find some interesting sound and build a song around it. Or I have situations more lately where I have like a very specific track in mind. I already kind of have the
You're
whole
humming
drop
it in your
loop in
head.
my head,
Yeah,
and I sit down and I try to replicate the sound exactly as I hear it. And 90% of it's like 90% accurate, like 85-90%
that's
accurate,
that's what
which
I
is
think.
good enough for me.
I've talked to a lot of songwriters that have that kind of thing happen. Like you have the happy accident, it comes out of nowhere,
Hmm.
and then I have had whole songs just come to me,
Yeah.
and then I wake up and I have my bedroom studio and I go run to my piano and I start putting it down what I heard in my head, and I just put my multi track on and I just start playing. because it's like right in my head, and it's like the whole thing. Like I know it just came to me out of nowhere, and it's like the whole thing, and I'm like, wow, that's weird. But that sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
I think it's because over time as you get better, there's like all these ideas just rolling around in your head, and then sometimes they collide and become one thing. And just I think as a musician, we just have to know when to pick it up, and when to kind of hear it. I think it just as a creative person, it just comes to you, and then you know how
Hmm.
to deal with it. I mean, do you feel like that as a creative person? I think like that's what why you're a creative person because you do have these things happen.
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of, let's say, since I'm also like making art and everything, a lot of stuff just comes into my mind somehow through dreams or daydreaming or just like randomly when I'm sitting at home or at work or something. And then I feel uh, f- like a real need to put it down somehow.
Mhm.
If
Yeah,
it's a drawing, I will start sketching right away just so I don't forget the concept. And if it's music, I will just quickly and dirty just push
put
out
it down.
a basic melody and or a vocal. And unfortunately, it's not always possible. I have like 20 song loops come into my head per day,
Mhm.
and
You can't
when
put them
you
all down.
cannot, you're not
Yeah,
always in the setting where you're possibly where you're capable of putting it down. So I think I actually managed to put stuff down maybe 3 to 4 times a week. Well, the vocal loops that I have on my phone, there's like 500 of them.
yeah, 'cause your phone's always with you.
Yeah, but if I have a melody, unfortunately that one escapes me, unless I can get to my laptop right away.
You have to get to yeah, you have to get to the machine. That's like me on my piano. Like
Yeah,
to get to
with the keyboard, yeah.
my Roland or something. Like if
Hmm.
I actually got to get to that. But then I got this little tiny device. I don't know. Got a um, teenage engineering little OP-Z.
OP. Oh, I love those. I love those.
Yeah, like so. The great thing about this thing is I just keep it in my backpack,
Yeah.
and if I get an idea, I got the headphones and I just do it. And this has captured so many
Yeah.
things that I wouldn't be able to capture because it's so freaking small. But it does a
Hmm.
lot.
It does.
It can put that. Actually I built a whole album because I wanted
Hmm.
to see if I could.
You
And I
can.
actually
Yeah.
when I first bought it, I'm gonna do a whole record just using this. And I did. And it was like and it was really fun because it's like so easy once you learn the workflow on it. I was like, wow. I mean, I wish I had an OP1, but they're crazy price. But
Yeah, it's
this
like one and a
OP,
half thousand, right?
yeah, it went to like 2 grand now.
Oh,
The new version of it's like 2 grand, and I'm like, this was way lower than that. But I was just like very happy to get it because it's just so quick when you want to
yeah.
do beats. I mean, you can sample anything.
Yeah.
You can just grab stuff out in nature. One time I just took a walk with it and was grabbing bird sounds and grabbing like water sounds, and I was just like, "Oh, this is fantastic! I can just like, yeah, I can use it, and I can MIDI it and bring it back into my stuff." And it was this. I just think it's a cool tool when you have something that small that is that usable, because I think the creative process that we were getting into, that it comes as dreams. It's like the muse that you kind of just pick it up. But then there's songs like that are I don't know, there's like songs I've had problems where like I really am trying to compose it. I'm actually like on the paper trying to
Hmm.
do it and plan it. And it takes like 6 months because I'm trying to make it into some big epic. And it's like and then the next day I have something that comes out so much easier. And I say,
Yeah.
well, why did I do that? The song that came out without any trouble actually was more exciting and it was better. So I was like, why did I spend all that time trying to do this other thing? but
I know.
yeah, you kind of got to live with it. As you get older, I find that like the stuff I have to torture myself over,
So
I
worth it.
tend I let it go.
Yeah.
but so in terms of like the whole process of the music business today, which we were kind of getting at, what do you think about like streaming versus having somebody buy a CD or buy vinyl or buy a tape. What do you think are like the pros and cons that exist now that we have this kind of different world to get our music out?
I mean, what's very widely known, obviously, is that streaming doesn't pay nearly as good as vinyl or records. It's still a saving grace that some DJs like buying vinyl for
Mm,
vinyl specific sets. So I do want to try and release vinyl versions of my work as well for
mhm,
the additional profit. But before you would be able to make much more money on physical sales. Now you're able to make much more money touring. It's kind of just replaced each other or switched spots. So even though I think getting heard was always the most important part, because
mhm.
once you have a fan base, it's easy to monetize merch,
Yeah, yeah,
shows,
yeah, the merch. The thing that's kind of always
Patreon.
yeah, that I think Patreon, those things are really cool. But the thing
Yeah.
that's always been disappointing to me is I'll go play in New York, right?
Mhm.
And I can make more money selling 100 t-shirts than I can on
Mm.
Spotify for months.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
But Spotify is the value of streaming is that it gets you
well,
gigs.
it gets the people to show up to the gig and then they bought the
Yeah.
shirt. But it's just the fact that the music can't make the money that the shirt makes the money. I guess the music caused you to buy the shirt, and so
Yeah,
it
it's
is the
all
music.
stemming from the
Yeah,
fact that you are a musician. So
yeah,
I wouldn't think of it in the way you are thinking,
yeah. I
you
guess
know.
I just remember the day when your album actually could bring you the money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, the
It wasn't
vinyl is
that long ago. It was like 2003
yeah,
still when you could make
yeah,
some money.
yeah. But I
Uh,
think vinyl is really cool as an artist because
yeah.
if you're into art and painting and drawing, then your full vision
Yeah, it can be
vinyl
expressed.
yeah, vinyl can show like allows you to do lyrics, you have a poster, you can have all this art in the front and the back. So it becomes an experience. I think it's there back in vinyl. The thing that they like is as a child of the 70s, that's what I did. That's what I consumed. And the
Mhm.
way I learned music was everything came as an album. So I listened to the whole thing because you didn't
Mhm.
skip around. Like, so
Yeah.
the one benefit of that was like if somebody gave me a record, I actually listened to A and B side because you kind of
Mhm.
did. Um, and so now today, the one thing about streaming is you can skip around. So
Yeah.
sometimes you don't ever listen to an artist's full vision, which I think is missing out. I would tell kids today, I think you miss out if you don't listen to the complete work of an artist that you like. You should actually try to listen to their complete work because if you don't, you're not getting a full vision of who they are.
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess when you're the kind of work you do is like longer form when you go to do a show, so people do to get to hear more of what you do.
Yeah, the show, that's why I say the shows are so important, you know?
Yeah, because then people actually get a full vision of what you sound like. It's not just one song.
Yeah, you can tell a story. You can make a
Yeah.
storyline.
Is that what you like? Do you like to plan out your set to have a theme?
So far, I've done that, but I think I'm not going to be doing that as much if I'm playing more often. But just kind of improvise in the moment and just pick songs with a certain energy on the spot.
Hmm. But you had tried to do like thematic stuff, but was it getting too difficult, or was it that you thought
It
it did?
it takes more time.
Hmm. So that's I think it's cool to actually to ask people about different approaches like that. So that's interesting. Yeah, I think like I like the jam band style. I would say they
Hmm.
would equate to what I do is like I could go out with like a set concept and I have like concept because I'm kind of that kind of person. But a lot of times I like to just go out and do a jam. And so I could actually go through a concept record I wrote and go song by
Hmm.
song in order and tell the story. Or I could just jump around my catalog and just jam out and do different versions. And sometimes lately I've been just going and kind of jamming, just mix and matching and randomly doing stuff compared to actually running through a full concept. So I kind of get what you're saying.
Exactly. I mean, but in general, it's just when you're playing so often, you really don't even have time to prepare that much anymore.
Oh yeah, if you start gigging a lot, you got to build a set list that you can control and know what's going to work. But I guess
Yeah,
the way you
exactly.
guys do it is like it's not like a rock band that has like a set list, right? You could be a little bit more dynamic.
It depends. I mean, whether you're live performing, playing synths live, or just DJing.
hmm Yeah, do you ever do like a combination of DJing with live playing, kind of hybrid?
Well, so far I've either done completely live performance, which takes out a lot of energy, or just DJing. But I do want to simplify my live performance and strip it down to DJing with like a drum pad and
hmm
maybe a smaller keyboard, and that's it.
Yeah, because I actually invested in like in a Kai Force, which is like an MPC, and
Yeah,
if I go on the road, I just bring that with like a Roland boutique. So I have a little like mini synth that has a little keyboard, and then I've got the pads, and I can launch clips. But I could
yeah,
also play the pads. So I
yeah.
could have a set arrangement and just go with it, or I could actually take the original 8 rows of clips and then throw it around. So I could either play it straight, or like I don't feel like playing it straight, so I'm gonna change the order of the whole song by rearrange the clips.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I could either do it one way. I can play it straight. If everybody wants to hear if I have a hit and somebody wants to hear that song, I'll just let it go and maybe unmute something and then play
Mhm.
something live over the unmuted track.
Mhm.
You know, and then so you could have your whole arrangement, and then you leave the lead synth line open so you could
Yeah.
play that live. Or you actually
Exactly.
get
Yeah.
funny and you actually get rid of the drum and you play the drum live,
Yeah. You can
which
just
is
make a
more.
choice yourself.
Yeah, you just make the choice of which thing are you gonna unmute and then play live to, and
Mhm.
then at least you're playing live on some of your tracks and you're not just letting it
Yeah.
run. Do you
It's more
is that what you do?
interesting and spontaneous, and also you get a slightly different result every time, even if you're trying to make it sound the same like the original, but you never will. And
Well, I
I
think
don't try anymore, I just let it happen.
do you think the fans appreciate when you solo or make it a little different? Do you find that they appreciate it more if you deviate from the original song, or do they want it to be closer to what you originally wrote?
Uh, the thing is, so far I haven't really performed live in front of large groups of people. I've only performed in galleries,
Okay.
and it's kind of in galleries. It's like very culture oriented people who are very mannered, so they
Okay, can't.
refrain from reacting too much until you finish. But then everybody gets like a big standing ovation once you're done.
Is that difficult? Because I know a lot of rock musicians have told me one thing about the COVID thing was like rock bands had a hard time doing online shows because they kind of live off the feedback with the audience, right? And
I
so is
haven't done online shows, so I'm not. But I
oh, your mic went up. Yeah.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I wanted to say that I do feel like I haven't had performances online during Corona, but I know even when I'm just talking in Zoom, when I'm presenting, for example, if I was in a meeting or something and everybody mutes themselves, it's really awkward and uncomfortable because you really don't know what people are thinking and
What the
you don't see
feedback
their
is.
face.
Yeah, yeah. The feedback. I think that is been a really hard thing, but I found a way to live perform, and the only way I can describe it is because I'm using so many keyboards and stuff, I kind of get into a zone.
Yeah.
And I think if you live perform on the net, the one thing you have to do, because you can't get the audience feedback, you
You're
have to,
looking down like into
yeah,
your sins.
you have to kind of get into your song so much that you get so into your own song that you translate the excitement to the crowd,
Yeah.
right? So you have to kind of be high on yourself and
Yeah.
high on your own music and be really confident that you're doing, and you just kind of get lost in it and then the feedback is because they people will see you're so into it, then they get into it, and then they like it. It's different than when you play like in New York in front of a crowd, and you got 500 people giving you energy back, and then you play based on that. I think
Mhm.
a lot of musicians we all kind of feed off the crowd, but when you can't, the only way to solve it is to kind of be high on yourself and do it that way.
Yeah.
which, which some people might have a hard time doing that because maybe they don't have the personality to do it, so they can't get into it, and it feels like false to them, so they can't feel it. But I don't know.
Yeah, it depends from person to person. But for me, I'm just, grateful to be playing and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like that crowd is like it's so polite. It's kind of what I heard in Japan. 'Cause I lived in Tokyo for 2 years. It's like you could play and you have no idea if they're digging it or not, and you're
Yeah.
like, well, I don't really know if these guys are digging it. They can kind of affect your performance if you're not. You start
Yeah.
getting hesitant, right? Because you're hesitant because you don't know if you're going over, right? This one over, like, well, I can't tell. And then at the end, like, they all go like, it's great. I'm like, would have been nice if I knew that like 5 minutes ago, but but um, but that's what it is. So certain cultures are just not into immediate gratification. It is like they're told to be polite and wait to the end, um,
Yeah.
which is harder for musicians that feed on that. Um, but I think it's a really great to have you on the show. We wanted you for a while, and we're happy that you're out there. You're getting more confident in your work, and you look like you're really progressing. Where you actually had opportunities to connect with people, and yeah, would love to see like more of your work as you release it, and when you get something that you want to show us. If you get like another project or something, we always bring our artists back. So anytime you have something that's really cool that you want to like shout out and push, feel free to have us as a platform that be part of your kind of marketing plan.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Oh, your mic. I think your mic went out again.
I said thank you very much for the opportunity and that I very much appreciate it.
Well, everybody, make sure you click on her Instagram and check her out everywhere that she is. We're gonna have the hyperlinks in the bio where you can find her music on the different platforms that she gave us. And we will be on Spotify within an hour with the same broadcast, and we'll send you the links so you can share it with your fans. We also ask people if you've liked this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that we can support talking to indie and emerging artists all over the world. That would be cool. It's Fan Electric Ghost on YouTube. And thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Have a good day or night. I always forget what time it is.
Yeah, here's night. Have a great day. I'll see you